for coming. Oh, recording in progress. Hold on, let me just say got it here. All right, so thank you guys for attending the Major to Career panel hosted by the Center for Career and Experiential Education. For those of you who don't know me or haven't had me yet, my name is Rachel Smith, and I'm a clinical associate professor here at URI in the CMD department. As we've already said, this panel is being recorded so that anybody who misses out, if you know somebody who wanted to attend but couldn't come today, they would have the opportunity to still get to see these wonderful panelists that have come to work with us. I wanted to start by asking each of our panelists to please introduce yourselves. You can use your pronouns if you prefer, and just to describe your current position and title. And I think to my right wins, so that would be Dr. Michelin Gauthier.
How did I know you'd pick me first?
Well, you were on the right. You were on the right. It's how
okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending. I'm excited to talk to you all today. My name is Dr. Michelin Gauthier. I am an audiologist and have been since 2007. I am the owner of Atlantic Audiology. We have offices in Cranston and North Kingstown. And I actually know Dr. Smith very well. We worked together for, oh boy, how many years? 9 years in an ENT setting before I came to work here. So that's a little bit about me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Gauthier. And then to the right wins again, Danielle Mullen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle Mullen. I work for the Groden Center Early Intervention Program as one of their speech language pathologists. I started in that job about 2 years ago when I started my clinical fellow year, and I've been there ever since.
Danielle, thank you. And we also have, I just don't see you, but Samantha Elkis, you're on here, right? Did you make it in? Oh, there you are. I see you.
I did, yes. Can you hear me?
I sure can.
Okay, so my name is Samantha Elkis. I'm a hearing care practitioner at Beltone, New England. I've been there for about 2 years, and that's about it.
Wonderful. Kelsey Jensen, did you make it in?
Hi, I'm here.
Oh, okay. All right. Oh, I see. Different last name. Got it.
Yeah, I just got married, so I have a different last name on this. So,
congratulations.
Thank you. So I'm a behavior analyst. I've been one since 2020, and then before that, I was an assistant behavior analyst, and I work at the Autism Center for New England Behavioral Services.
Great. So you guys, all of the students that are here, you realize that so all of these professionals have given up some of their time to come here to talk to you. They are all alumni of this program, so they've sat in the same seats that you are sitting in. Well, not right now, but in your classes, and they've had some of the same professors as you. So this is their opportunity or your opportunity to pick their brains about how their process and progress have gone through their education and into their careers. What we're going to do is I'm just going to have some questions to ask the panel, pretty easy questions. Panel, feel free to just kind of jump right in and answer, unmute yourself and answer. And then at the end, students, I would love to have you guys ask questions of the panel. So thinking about what their journey is, if you have questions about what your interests are, and get some good information, pick their brains. So for the panelists, can you tell us about your career journey after graduating from URI? What position did you start in, and then how did you enter the role that you're in now? Some of you've already said, went from your CF into this position, but there's also some transition there as well. So feel free to share about that journey.
All right, do you want me to go we'll go in the same order? All right,
Sure,
here we go. So I did my 4th year in audiology at the ENT office that I worked at for the first 9 years, 10 years of my career. And in that setting, we saw everyone from, oh boy, 2-month-olds up to patients over 100 years old. So we really saw the full gamut of everything. Which anyone looking at audiology, I think ENT is a great way to start because you get such a vast experience and knowledge base about hearing loss, about different types of hearing loss, dealing with different age groups, and, learning surgical components to hearing loss and hearing aids, soup to nuts. So I think that was a great first experience. I worked with also cochlear implants, which is, a little bit more hospital and ENT focused. And so, yeah, I stayed there for 10 years. So, and then it was time to move on.
I'm not really supposed to do this, but I am also a URI alumni and I have to agree with Dr. Gauthier. So I'm like an unofficial panel member here. And my students hear about it all the time. I talk about ENT, but I also had the same path as Dr. Gauthier where working for the ENT, I did my clinical residency there. And she's absolutely right that environment gave us the opportunity to do pretty much almost anything that an audiologist does. So it was truly a great experience. So
and one thing I didn't mention is like vestibular and balance, which is really, something that's mostly just done in that ENT setting as well. So, yeah.
And now you're in owning a private practice. Do you have anything to say about that transition?
Sure. I didn't know if we wanted to go that deep. Yeah. So,
Yeah, go deep.
That far into the path. So I've been the owner here at Atlantic Audiology, for 7 years. And it was a practice that was here before me. The gentleman decided to retire. He was a little bit older, and hearing aids now sync up to smartphones. And he said, I don't have a smartphone, so I shouldn't be connecting anyone's hearing aids to their smartphone. So it was a good time for him to kind of transition out. But that tells you a little bit about the technology and the advancements with hearing aids. And hearing aids really was always my main focus that I was more passionate about at the ENT practice. So we see mostly adults here. I have myself, another audiologist, and then I have an hearing instrument specialist as well. And Karina actually has an undergraduate degree in communicative disorders from URI. So she decided not to pursue her AUD, and she decided to go for the hearing instrument specialist license. And so she works with us doing hearing aid fittings and assisting in the office. So we have, a little bit of everything here to assist our patients. So.
I don't mean to heavy end the hearing healthcare professions on this end, but Dr. Gauthier kind of led straight into it. Samantha, are you willing to speak to your position and how that relates?
So I'm assuming it's very similar to what we're doing here, except I'm not an audiologist, so I can't really go as far as diagnosing things of the ear. We do have some 101-year-olds here as well, so mainly people from their 30s to, I would say, 90s mainly. They come in and I test their hearing, and if they do have a hearing loss, we'll figure out what the best hearing aid is to prescribe. It is very similar, and I assume I'm probably doing what the hearing instrument specialist is doing with you as well. So bell tone is pretty much just hearing aids, when audiologists and ENTs do a little bit further. So if it's a medical referral, I'll tell them, well, you should see an audiologist first and then come back if you still need an evaluation. Yeah.
Great. I think that's great. The connection between the two professions is really strong. Right. They have some very, very similar pathways, and then there's things that they do just a little bit differently. But as students, that you have two options here. Some want to continue on for that more schooling and all of that. And then some just want to get their hands dirty and get right in and start. And so that's, I think, the path that Samantha chose, which I think is wonderful as well. Great. Another panelist in terms of your journey following graduation and how you got to where you're at.
I guess I can talk about mine. So when I was getting my bachelor's in communicative disorders, I just wanted to get experience. So I started working as a behavior specialist for Perspectives. I did ABA there as a just, I had no experience. I have a brother with special needs, but other than that, I started working in that, and then I worked through that until I graduated. And when I graduated, I needed a job, a full-time job, and the company I was at couldn't offer me full-time hours. So I went and did treatment coordination for same services. They had ABA services, home-based, it's called HBTS and PASS. Those are the programs. And so it was all sorts of kids and teens that had, they had autism, we had Down syndrome kids, even kids that had mental health disorders. So, and I was just kind of behind the scenes. I would manage, the plans and submit them to insurance. And I also got to train staff. So I did that, and I really enjoyed it, and I was debating going speech or going to school to be a behavior analyst, and that's what I ended up choosing because I loved working with the kids with behaviors, and it kind of tied into my speech degree in that a lot of the kids that did have behaviors, it was either because they didn't have language or just didn't have a means to communicate if they vocally couldn't communicate. So that's the kind of direction I went in.
That's great. And I think some of you are actually working as past workers currently for either Perspectives, or their other Groden Network as well has different. So I think that's a great connection if you really enjoy that part of any of the externships or internships that you're doing. Kelsey's path works quite nicely for you. Great, thank you. Danielle, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of said it all already, but I found the Groden Network actually through one of the career panels that we had when I was a freshman in undergrad. And I just really liked their message and everything they had to offer. So I did the fast track and got my master's in 5 years in speech pathology. I started at the Groden Network. I actually started during spring break of my final year of grad school. I did all of like my orientation and started shadowing the speech therapist who I was going to be taking over for. I originally started, it was just me. For a full-time speech therapist, I had a supervisor who was phenomenal, who was there for me throughout my entire clinical fellow year. And then over the past 2 years, we've built up a team, and there's now 4 full-time SLPs that I'm working with, and a couple more that are part-timers. So we've got a fun little team that we're working on. And I work in early intervention, which means I work with the birth to 3 population. So it's a lot of fun hanging out with the little kiddos.
That's great. So you guys actually have kind of answered this question a little bit, but I'm gonna poke a little more. Do you think that there are specific skills or work experiences or academic coursework, you've all been through CMD, but academic coursework that can make students more competitive for positions within the field, either in your specific organization or the field in general that you've experienced? Feel free to kind of ad lib or tell any kind of experiences that you've had that you found beneficial.
I can start since I'm just never muted myself again. I would say one of the things that actually I didn't necessarily do as a part of my education, but I think is a huge part of early intervention, is just working with families, whether that be babysitting. I worked in preschools. I worked like within the school setting as part of my clinical placements, really getting to know like how to talk to families and approach them from not just a clinical standpoint, but like from their field. You have to empathize with the families because we have a lot of clinical knowledge as speech pathologists. We know all the nitty gritty of what helps foster more language development, but these families don't know that. And these families, frankly, are just a little bit scared right now because they don't know why their kid isn't talking and they're worried about their future. So being able to put yourself in like the family's shoes and recognize not only like where they're coming from, how to communicate with them from where they're at, also recognizing different cultural differences and how that may impact strategies that I'm able to give families. So a lot of working on building like your empathy skills and your ability to talk to people who don't necessarily know as much about your field as you do.
All right, well, that's a tough act to follow, but I'll try to say something comprehensive about audiology. So I think one of the things, if I could go back, we always think about, what we did when we were younger and when we were in school. So we had to do, oh boy, I don't know how many hours of observation, even just in undergraduate work. And, I think I took kind of the easier road, if I think about it, and went to some of the bigger practices, the bit larger ENT practices. They were just a little bit more amenable to having people observe. But if you're able to do more of a varied experience in that, either going into, if it's speech pathology or audiology or whatever it is, going into school systems, going into hospital settings, going into an ENT setting, just to gain a little bit of a different perspective. I don't know if that's what led me to ENT initially, but as much as that was a great way to start, I didn't really have any idea about how other audiologists were working in other settings. So I think a varied experience there for your observations is certainly important. And if there's any way to get some type of work, whether it be internship work or just something really part-time in a setting that you're interested in, there's nothing like actually being there during a work day as an employee or a part of the team versus just an outside observer to really see how things tick. And that just gives you that confidence to know whether or not that setting is appropriate for you, or if that's something that you're interested in. A little bit more observation can be helpful in that manner. So that's it.
That's great. I actually say that quite often. Again, I'm not on the panel, but I'm gonna play anyway. Is the toughest thing I think for me was when I was in this situation. I said, "Oh, I love kids. I want to work with kids. I'm gonna do things with kids." And then I would do observations with kids, and I would do the thing with kids, and then I slowly realized I don't really like working with kids. Okay. Kids are wonderful. I have some of them. But what I'm saying is that, you get yourself kind of focused on this one thing. And so the classes that were dedicated to pediatric specialty, I was like, oh, this is going to be amazing. And then when I actually did the observation, I realized, wow, that is a lot more energy than I have. And so I actually found that really working with the adult population was better for me simply because once I broadened what I was doing. So I think Dr. Gauthier hit the nail on the head saying, try to see all of the things and really soak up all of the academic offerings so that you can see really where you would fit best. Anybody else on the panel have anything to add?
So I can kind of relate back to what Kelsey said when she was working with special needs children, because I worked with 2 undiagnosed children, and that was home care, and it was all throughout COVID. So I felt like that had helped me a lot in figuring out how to, take care of a person and really empathize with them. I even do home care visits here too. I don't have to, I'm not required to do that, but there's a patient with dementia and he's the cutest old man. So I go to his house every once in a while. I also found a few of the classes that I took, everything I learned at URI was definitely helpful. But I think Dr. Smith, it was one of your classes. It was the class where we learned tympanometry and then learning how to read audiograms. And that was like a whole memory lane when I got here, because I was reading them and I was like, oh my gosh, Dr. Smith would be so proud of me. But that helped. And then the phonetics class helped a lot, because that has everything to do with speech and hearing and explaining how you're hearing different phonemes and sounds and how words all come together. And then I also took a sign language course at CCRI. And I'm not sure if there's programs at URI like this now, but that definitely gave me an advantage with some of my patients here, because some of them are deaf. It's funny because I wanted to work with kids, started out with kids, and then I realized that I really just loved the hearing industry as a general population and working with hearing aids, and now I'm here.
Oh, shucks. Class on tympanometry did it. The most thrilling of all, right, guys? Right, guys? Oh, no, okay, you're all muted. I mean, you're cheering on the inside. I hear you. Okay. Anyone else? I can't remember if everybody went. You don't have to, by the way, panelists, you don't have to answer every question, but if you have something, feel free.
I feel like I kind of agreed with like what everyone has said. Our field is like behavior analysis is like it's its own field in itself. So we work with like so many different types of kids, different severities of behavior. Some kids just come in for like skill acquisition deficits, and then others come in for strictly aggressive behaviors. So I think for like if anybody was interested to go into the field that I'm in, I would just say getting experience with all different types of kids and getting comfortable being around kids who have behaviors, because at times it is uncomfortable when you first start in the field, and then you kind of become immune to it. But like just getting experience working with people, because we work with so many different kinds of families, and then different kinds of clientele. So it kind of piggybacks off of what everyone else just said, but I think that would be important.
Great. One thing that I could say for myself is even though I went into communicative disorders and then I graduated and then I went into audiology and for the education parts of it, I still basically, and despite the fact that I also observed, I did some observations, I really didn't know what we do every day. But I didn't know what a day in the life really looked like, because your observations were like, what, 1 hour, 2 hours, maybe tops. So can anybody just kind of give an idea of describe actually a day in the life in your position, from when you walk through the front door to the day when you walk back out to your car at the end of the day? Just give us an idea of what really a day looks like and what we expect in your different type of places and settings.
All right, I'll jump in and go first. So I'll actually, maybe this would be helpful. I'll talk a little bit about ENT and then what I do in private practice to give 2 snapshots in audiology. So in ENT, there's a lot of focus on the fact that there are physicians who are working in conjunction with the audiologists. And so a lot of those patients need hearing tests, and they're also seeing the doctor. So there's a lot of coordination for their medical visit and making sure that we do a hearing test before that, because that's going to help the doctor with diagnosing. So Samantha was talking about, hearing instrument specialists can do certain things, and then audiologists can kind of piggyback on top of that with other things. And then we move on to the ENTs and what they can do. So working in conjunction there, there can be a lot of scheduled hearing tests, and then there can be a lot of hearing tests that get thrown at you that you weren't expecting for the day. So that can be really exciting and really stressful, and might be why people might not stay in that type of a setting forever, because it can be a little bit exhausting. But then we also would have, mornings where we would just see, 20 hearing tests, and then a morning where we would see 3 patients and fit them with hearing aids and spend an hour with each patient. So there can be a lot of variability there. And then doing some of the balance testing as well. That was, patients that were basically seen by the doctor and referred back to us because we needed to do more testing. Audiology, we focus a lot on hearing, but balance is a big piece of it as well. So our dizzy patients or patients who get episodic dizziness or positional dizziness, doing tests with them. And then those tests are longer tests, so you don't have quite as many of those in a day, but they're a little bit more intense. And then in audiology here in private practice, I always say that I wear a lot of hats. So that can be very different depending on the practice, but here I wear the administrator hat, the finance hat, the audiology hat, the front desk manager hat. And so all of those hats desks have to find a spot during the day. But I could see 8 patients in a day, or I could see 12 patients in a day, depending on what we have scheduled. So I think that's actually one of the things I like the most about audiology is there is some variability. I was initially at URI to go to pharmacy school, and I'm now married to a pharmacist. And from what he tells me of just the rote, constant over and over filling of prescriptions, that would not be good for me. I need some variety throughout the day. And so that's something, you know, to think about yourself as well. Are you open to doing the same thing over and over and over again, or do you want some of that variability in your day? And I get the opportunity to kind of control the variability for myself in this setting. So that's a little bit different than an ENT setting where someone else is dictating the schedule. So those are important things to kind of maybe know about yourself when you're making a decision about next steps. I also love that we have 2 offices. So when Dr. Smith and I were in the ENT setting, our practice had 4 offices, 3 offices, I forget. Anyway, it changed all the time, but we were never just always in the same location all week. So that gave us a nice amount of variability with like working with different front desk people, different clientele in different areas and demographics throughout the state. And so I like that now as well, because I have staff that works in each office and I see them on one day and someone different on the next. So if variety is the spice of life for you, that's something to think about too. You know, whether it's just being in one office or maybe doing something travel related or looking at a setting that has multiple locations.
Thank you for sharing that. You're making me remember the ENT days. Oh, Lord. Someone else?
I can kind of piggyback off of that. So my job looks very different from a lot of office jobs. Early intervention is home-based services. So that means I am on the road all day, every day, seeing kids. Every day is also completely different, which was something that I really wanted to, because I knew I was also the type of person who I didn't want to do the same thing day in and day out. It depends on the day. So I see anywhere from 3 to 6 kids within a day. I see some kids at home. I see some kids at their daycares. I see some kids out in the community. We've done visits to the zoo, to parks, to the children's museum, different things like that. We also do evaluations as a part of their intake process. So sometimes I help out with evaluations. We also, a part of my job is transitioning kids into the school department before they turn 3. So I will be attending school meetings for the children that I'm working with, helping set up their IEPs, giving information on the strategies that have worked, things that haven't, what their skills are, things like that. So it's kind of different every day in EI, which is really fun for me. And even if I'm doing the same thing where maybe 2 days in a row I have all home visits, none of those home visits look the same, because like I was saying earlier, every family is completely different. So everything we're working on is completely different, which is really fun for me. So I love it.
One question I could ask that kind of piggybacks on this, and please, again, you can answer the original question if you want to, but this might be just a quick answer. In my class and actually throughout our department, we're working very hard to talk about interdisciplinary work as a part of your jobs. Just curious, who's on your interdisciplinary team? Who else are you working with every day in your job? So you can feel free to answer the original question, but maybe add that, or if somebody wants to add something about that as well. Who's on your team?
I guess I can comment. Just because my day is pretty much like Danielle's. I do home-based clients and then we do have a center. So some days I will be on the road like she is, going from house to house or house to center, depending on who I'm seeing. We also do behavioral assessments. So some days, we might be doing an assessment, and usually you know, I'll see a client, I'll go to session, I'll supervise the therapist running the programs with the client. And then, you know, most of it's supervision or parent consults where we go and we're training the parents on, you know, different goals the child has. And for interdisciplinary teams, we do work a lot in collaboration with, if they have an outside speech, if they have school speech, school OT, school PT, basically any outside services or school services that the child has, we typically will reach out and try to collaborate. That way it's just a cohesive treatment plan all around for them. So we typically work with a lot of speech pathologists and OT, mainly OT PT. Yeah.
So to speak a little bit of how my day usually goes, I actually started as an HCP tech in the Westerly and Narragansett locations, and I was assisting another practitioner there. So we would actually swap offices every other day. And then there was an office here in South Attleboro. I'm from Cumberland, so this was a lot closer for me. So they moved me to this office. So this is the one that I manage. I'm not the owner, but I manage this office and I'm the main practitioner. I work with one other person who is our PCC, patient care coordinator. She's like our receptionist. She handles all phone calls, all billing, orders, all of that. I also handle that, but if she's here, she pretty much does all of that. Typically in a day, I'll get here at 8:30. I'll review the schedule with my PCC, and from 9 to 5, we're seeing patients all day. We have a lunch break. Usually I'll see about 20 patients a day. 2 of those are full hearing evaluations where it's usually persons coming in for the first time. They come in, I introduce myself, I ask why they're here. We'll test their hearing, do some speech tests, and we'll kind of dig deeper into their communications and how they're comprehending speech and how they feel they're doing with their family, just quality of life in general. And then after that, we'll usually prescribe hearing aids and go over insurance policies, anything to get them coverage. After that, usually I'll see them every week, every 2 weeks, and then follow-up care is free with Beltone, so they'll come in every 3 to 4 months. That's for like 30-minute appointments and annual testing every year. Sometimes I'll squeeze people in at like 8:30. I've come in at 8 o'clock one day for a patient, and I've stayed as late as 8 o'clock p.m. So it really depends on the practitioner if you're willing to stay for that patient and go that extra mile. And then there's also home visits that you can do. You don't have to if you don't feel comfortable. They don't require us to do that. But for patients who can't drive, or I do have a 97-year-old who can't drive, has dementia, and him and his wife are both 97 at home, living their life happily. So it's a lot of different things that go on throughout the day, but with me and our PCC here, it makes it a lot smoother.
What I'm hearing from everyone is it's not a sit at your desk and stare at a computer all day kind of job, right? That's basically what it is you get. So it sounds like a lot of variation. Samantha, I really like that you get a lunch. I hope everybody else gets a lunch too. I do realize that sometimes when you're in a healthcare profession and a helping profession, sometimes you might be working a lot more than you expect. But I think that that's always good to figure out. Again, we've kind of talked about this, figuring out what matches your personality the best and where you fit. Thank you for sharing about your days. And like I said, with the interdisciplinary, it's just interesting to hear who you work with. You know, it's a lot of jobs you're working all by yourself. Samantha, actually, I didn't really, you know, I never knew that you would have somebody actually else in the office with you. I thought kind of you did the whole thing. So I think that's really great. The next question I have is a little more, it's a little more fun to answer, but what do you find most rewarding or most challenging or most challenging about your job and your current job?
All right, I'll go. So I would say the most rewarding thing about our job is when you help someone here and they haven't heard the way that you're helping them here in your office in 5, 10, 15, pick a number years. It's a pretty amazing thing to experience. I'll be very honest, it's not like the videos you see on Facebook where everybody is happy and lovely and wonderful and there's a party. Sometimes it can be that, but just to be able to change someone's life in that way can be really exciting. And I love to convert someone who is not wanting to be here. So a lot of people unfortunately come in a little bit begrudgingly to talk about hearing aids and talk about hearing loss. They might be in the denial phase, or they might be a little ambivalent. They know they need to do something, but they're not quite ready. So I love the challenge of trying to figure out what is the barrier for that person and helping to try to remove that barrier. And I get a lot of enjoyment about over being able to win that patient over and get them to where they need to be. And because we know they need it, just like I need to lose 10 pounds and my doctor tells me every time I see her, maybe more than that. But, when she wins that battle, she's going to be excited too. So I feel like I can sometimes help people through a battle that they're fighting, and, get them to make that decision. And then obviously the family members and their reactions, can sometimes be priceless as well. So that's really great. I'd say the challenging part is, dealing with the public can sometimes be interesting. You get a lot of different personalities, and you don't always mesh well with every personality. So, just like we're not best friends with everybody that we meet. You're not always going to be best friends with your patients or the people that you're working with, and that's okay. You still have to be yourself, and they'll find their person, but sometimes that can be a little bit tough and challenging to take that in, but it is what it is. You never know who's walking through the door and what's going to happen. So
You mean to say, Dr. Gothier, that not all cochlear implant fittings are like those videos where they all start crying and it's
They're
so
not.
emotional and amazing?
they're not, no.
They're
A
not.
lot of people don't like it in the beginning. They get there, they do get there, but yeah, it's just, there's social media and there's reality. So they don't always meet up, and that's life. But if we prepare them for the fact that that's not going to necessarily be their experience, then that's okay. And they're maybe a little bit more ready for it. But yeah.
I can go next. I would say one of the things that drew me to EI is just how much language development actually happens in those first 3 years. So my favorite part of the job is I can really see these kids who will start with me with no functional vocabulary, nothing, no way to communicate with their family. And sometimes if I'm lucky, these kids will leave me talking in full sentences, and the families are so incredibly happy about it. So it's really exciting to just be able to watch that progress and know that I played a hand in it. Kind of going with that though, the most difficult part of the job is knowing that I have these skills, I know what will help a kid, but sometimes families aren't ready to hear what we need to do to work with these kids to get them to be functional communicators. Like I tell all my families, we use a total communication approach, which means I bring in AAC, I bring in sign language, I bring in anything and everything to make sure that they're functional communicators. And some families are really not interested in doing anything other than verbal language. So it can be hard sometimes working with those families and knowing that I could help their little one and it could solve a lot of their problems if they had a way to communicate their wants and needs, but the family's just not ready to hear it yet.
I feel like me and Danielle have a lot of similarities because I do struggle with the parents as well. That would probably be like the hardest part of my job. Especially because with the kids that have behaviors, a behavior reduction plan does not happen overnight. It takes consistency and it's a lot of work up front for a parent to do. But getting that buy-in from them at times is hard. A lot of parents come and they want us to kind of just fix the child's behavior problems. And a lot of the kids do great with us, and the parents are just like, it must be us. Like they won't, do this for us. So like getting that parent buy-in sometimes is very difficult, and parents are resistant to doing our plans. So that is definitely a downside of the job, but I definitely think it's rewarding to see when a kid has behaviors as a barrier to like language, academics, social skills, and you're able to kind of tweak it to be more functional, where he's telling you he's upset versus throwing a chair, hitting, like kicking, any of those behaviors. And then they're able to access so much more in their daily life, even like having a better relationship with their parents. So I think that would be the most rewarding part. So kind of similar.
So some of the most rewarding things here is, again, helping people hear better. That's mainly what we do here. We want to improve people's lives with hearing aids. So technology is always improving, and it's always crazy to me because I have patients who come in with 10-year-old hearing aids, and I know the technology, but it somehow always shocks me still as much as they're shocked as well of how well they're hearing even better than 10 years ago. So we have new studies, new technology, everything is improving. And I mean, everybody's ears are different. So I think that's the challenging part, is that everyone's ears are different, including our own too. So somebody might have one hearing loss in their left ear and none in their right. Or somebody could come in and have a very profound hearing loss and with like dexterity issues. You kind of have to cater it to the person. So a challenging part was putting hearing aids in. I always tell people, and I set those expectations, it's going to be very hard to do that. And a lot of people don't like change, especially elderly people. So you'll make good relationships, and there's patients who have come in with photos of their grandchildren, or they'll bring me cookies and they're very, very thankful that they can hear. And I would say it's more rewarding than challenging.
It's great. It sounds like, I think from across the board, basically, there's no cookie cutter answer for every single patient or child or client that you're working with. Everybody's dealing with realistic expectations or unrealistic expectations, and on the part of the patient, client, or family potentially. But Samantha, you hit the nail on the head, just saying, it sounds like this field, communicative disorders as a whole, and you're here because this is a helping profession. And sounds like everybody's successes just come from your success of actually helping people. And right, Dr. Gauthier said it too, you're not going to get along with absolutely everybody. But right, when they bring you in cookies, or I have one patient who, as soon as the dahlias start blooming, we'll get some dahlias in our office because he's just so grateful, and you build up those relationships with the families and with the clients. And it must be hard, especially for you, Danielle and Kelsey, when you see the kids grow up and move on, right? They step forward. So I think that I've hit all of the questions that I feel were really pertinent to what we were discussing here. I would love to open up the floor to the students. If you have specific questions, I would love to hear your voices. But if you prefer to put a question in the chat, we're monitoring the chat as well and can ask those questions for you. And if it's just a general question, wonderful. Or if it's specific to one of our panelists in terms of their role, that's fine as well. I think, Milena, you've got your hand up, right? Hit it.
This is for the whole panel. Sorry, I'm in the library, so sorry if it's a little noisy. But I just wanted to ask, what was your experience transitioning from school to being hands-on in the field? And was there anything you found surprising or shocking you couldn't learn in class that you learned in the field?
That's better than my questions. Oh,
I'll chime in. I just think working with people, you don't really learn that in a school setting. You don't learn how to like professionally handle, a parent who's emotionally charged because, their child's not making progress or they don't agree with your treatment. That's something I think just working with people and getting more experience is something you learn, but it's definitely a huge aspect, I think, of a lot of the jobs that we all do. So like that would be something I didn't learn in school that I had to learn after.
I would say
To-
that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
To add on to that, sorry, I lost my train of thought. To add on to that, graduating from URI, like I would agree, it's interacting with people and really learning those skills. And that's something you just learn as you go. You kind of have to think on the fly sometimes with people who say things a little out of pocket, and you still have to maintain that professional look and how you speak and present yourself, because at the end of the day, you're representing the company you work for, you're representing your practice and yourself. So that's something that can be very hard at times. But again, doing things like that I didn't realize in the moment, presentations and talking to my peers and studying with my study group at the time, all of those things helped me learn different people and different personalities. And I think that would be something that could help you in the future.
So I was just gonna say, working with such a varied population in the setting that I started working in, I think that my experience in work prior to that, I was a waitress and bartender at the Muse Tavern way back in the day. I'm sure all you URI folks know about that place. But something like that just really allows you to meet a lot of people. Drunk people are maybe not always the best people to meet, but that you never know what they're going to do or say. So just having, something where you're kind of learning on the fly or able to kind of transition easily is good. So like if you're interested in working with kids, maybe working in a daycare setting or working in a toy store or working, doing something, kind of on the side to expose yourself to whoever those patients are that you think you want to work with. Because like Dr. Smith said, sometimes you think you want to do something and then you actually start doing it, and it might not be your cup of tea. So, and you don't really get a lot of that experience until you're in it for a little bit longer time. So, you don't want to start in a position and then feel like you're kind of stuck there with something that you're not, super interested in. So, some of that you just kind of learn along the way, and trust your instincts that if it doesn't feel right, think about what doesn't feel right about it, and then just kind of make that transition if you need to. So
That was a great question. Any other questions from the group?
Yeah, I have a question. So right now I work in ABA and HBTS. I would like to work in EI, that's my end goal, but I'm seeing a lot with the speech pathologists that we have in ABA right now that there can be a lot of times where the fields are like not meshing. They're having a hard time figuring out what's right for the kid between ABA or the speech realm. So I'm just wondering if any of you have experienced that and what you would do in that case for the discrepancies.
I've worked with a couple speech pathologists, and I don't know if it's from just their experience, if they've never like worked in ABA or worked with a behavior analyst. But then I've also worked with some speech pathologists that were really well, like they knew what ABA was, they were familiar with it, they've seen sessions, and they were they were great to work with because they understood me and I kind of understood them a little bit, just having an undergrad degree in it. So I, would explain like if we were collaborating for it, like it happens a lot in schools, like that's kind of where I've butted heads, mainly because I think certain speech pathologists might stay in a school for a long time. And I think this particular one hadn't really done any outside services. So and I think we just kind of presented our stances and tried to collaborate what's best. And in that sense, the parents kind of decided which way they wanted to go. And I just kind of honored the parents. And if it wasn't speech, like if it was a speech specific item, I kind of, would honor her, whatever she was thinking was best, because that's not my area of competency, although we do work a lot on functional communication to reduce behaviors. So you just tread lightly, I guess, and like try to like show the person where you're coming from, why you want to do something a certain way. But I will say, like, I have worked with some really great speech pathologists that I think we did a really good job collaborating, and it was beneficial to the client because we were both like really on the same page because we understood each other.
And then kind of coming from the EI side of things, I think what we're seeing a lot, just kind of not even just in EI, just across the world, is we're kind of shifting this mindset to be more like neurodiversity affirming. And ABA, old school ABA, isn't necessarily rooted in that neurodiversity affirming kind of practices. So a lot of speech pathologists are trying to like lead the charge of let's be more affirming and let's make sure that we're honoring these kids what they need, what is going to work best for them. But their ABA is also evolving, and I've worked with some really wonderful ABA practices in Rhode Island. The Groden Center specifically specializes in ASD, so a lot of the kids that we get are most likely looking at a diagnosis down the line, if not during their time with us. And part of our job, if they do receive that diagnosis while they're with us, is we explain all of the options to families, and we tell them that ABA is another option to get more services for their child, and we help them look into programs. So it's about finding that common ground, kind of like what Kelsey was saying, of like what we both want the kids to do well. We want them to succeed. We want them to learn, and just trying to meld best practice, most up-to-date practice with what we're well trained in.
Oh, thank you. Any other questions? I think we have time for one more. Even if you want to put it in the chat, if speaking up is not your jam. Okay, well, I will, then we can, if anybody does have questions for our panelists, I'm sure that they would be happy to answer. You can always contact me and we can figure out a way to get your questions to our panelists. I'm sure they would be very happy to continue this conversation if needed, especially if you've got some very specific questions. I want to say thank you so much to our panel for coming. I know it's tough at the end of a really, really long day to come and do this and take time out of your schedules. And some of you might be using this as your lunch break. So I really appreciate that. I apologize. Kristen, is there anything else that we need to say or you would like to say?
No, we're good. Thank you everyone for coming, and I'll be sure to connect you, Rachel, so with the panelists, CC you on our thank you notes. You have all their emails as well in the event that students may reach out.
Wonderful.